This weekend marks the 4th anniversary of the National Inquiry's final report into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We wanted to take a closer look at what has been done since the Trudeau government received that report and the 231 calls for justice. For more on this, we are joined now by Tanya Talaga. She's an Anishinaabe author and columnist for the Globe and Mail. We've reached her in Toronto. Thank you so much, Tanya. I know you're in the middle of writing a book, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's talk about the 231 calls for justice that the inquiry had in its final report. How would you rate the progress on those 4 years later?
Well, if I was to give it a grade, I would say an F. Sadly, we have hardly a handful of those calls to justice being completed. Progress is so slow. And if you are a family member, if you are a survivor of MMIWG, of violence against our women, this is not good enough at all. I mean, we have a situation where we are fighting still to have our women, police investigators, to look at landfill sites across Winnipeg. We have still the problem of our women going missing and police not responding quick enough to those calls. This is a nationwide problem, and in the last several years since the end of the inquiry, so little has happened.
As you say, it's been so many years. Perhaps before we go on and talk about any progress that has or has not been made, can you just remind our audience as to why this inquiry was initiated in the first place?
There are thousands of our women that have gone missing, that have died, that have been murdered, and no proper police investigation ever happened. We had so many women go missing along the Highway of Tears in BC. We have so many women go missing from Thunder Bay, from Northern Ontario, Northern Quebec, from every single one of the prairie provinces. And sadly, for so long, we have had a situation where our families were not taken seriously when they called the police to say, we need to have help. We need a real investigation to happen here. And we're still seeing that, and this all stems from policies against our people, policies of exclusion, policies like the Indian Act, like residential schools. There was an othering of Indigenous people in this country, and you see that still to this very day. You see that we are still fighting for systemic change in all levels of government, in all institutions, in order to be taken seriously and to be given the same equitable rights that every other Canadian has. And these are the very large root causes of MMIWG, the crisis that we now find ourselves in. And it's going to take a massive, monumental effort in order to turn that around, which the National Inquiry was and attempted to do, and so came out with the 231 calls for justice. We know how to move forward, but we must be given the resources and the buy-in from the Canadian public in order to move forward.
When you talk about moving forward, I just want to get your reaction to something the Trudeau government announced on Monday about how it's spending some of the money stemming from the report, $116 million in supports for families who are victims of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and other related crimes. And they say this money will be spread out, the large chunk of it, over the next 5 years. And that is for support services directly led by Indigenous people. Is that the kind of progress you're looking for, or is that just a drop in the bucket?
It's a start, and I do applaud the government for doing that. It is better than nothing, and we really do need more resources when it comes to survivors and when it comes to healing and when it comes to the family liaison units. You know, that is such an important need in all of the provinces. The units are places where family members can call in order to access police officers or coroners, or to find out about what's happening with the case of their missing or murdered loved one. But saying that, though, you know, I point to the work that NDP MP Lee Gazin is doing in raising the alarm and the necessity of moving forward with action concerning the calls for justice and MMIWG. You know, she pointed out recently that $724 million was earmarked in 2021 to fight gender-based violence, and we are nowhere near to spending that amount of money. But again, it's not just about the resources. That is, of course, a big help, but it is about the will of all of Canadians to understand that this is a genocide and that we need all of your help in order to see and to call for justice for our women.
You mentioned the word genocide, and as you know, the National Inquiry called the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada a genocide. That word was loaded and was controversial at the time when it was used. When you look at what you're calling the lack of progress, you're giving it an F rating at this point. Where do you think things are falling down? You talk about wanting Canadians to get on side. Are you putting the blame on the government for being too slow? What about the impact of that word genocide? Where do we stand today, in your opinion?
Things are getting better. You know, we're having this conversation. We're talking about it. Somebody in your news organization recognized that it's been several years since the inquiry came out and we need to talk about it. That's important, you know. It's important that we are recognizing Red Dress Day. You know, it's important that we're recognizing Orange Shirt Day. But it goes beyond the performative as well. We need to educate our children about the realities of this country and how this country was formed, how there is still an Indian Act in place, how it is that the last residential school closed in 1996 in this country. And all of those things feed into what we see now, what the othering that I was talking about, and the need to look upon our people with respect, our women with respect. You know, we knew this was a genocide. It's up to the rest of Canada to learn more, to educate themselves, and work with us to overcome this.
You know, the inquiry found that the continuing cycle of intergenerational trauma had devastating consequences for Indigenous girls and women. You're writing a book about Indian residential schools, and you've hinted at that connection. I wonder, as you look forward, what are you hoping to do with your book and raise awareness? Is education the key going forward, in your opinion?
Absolutely. You know, I'm a bit of a one-trick pony when it comes to this. I talk a lot about education reform, and I truly believe that this is the way we must move as a country. You know, every single province, every single territory, we all need to examine the curriculums that are being taught to our children, and there needs to be real change when it comes to those curriculums. You know, in Ontario, we had so many First Nation, Métis, Inuit teachers and principals look at the curriculum and try to make changes. And then some of those changes have happened, a lot more have not happened. We are waiting for that to continue. And all of the provinces need to go along the same way. I mean, we have to teach another generation of Canadians, a new generation of lawmakers and police officers, investigators and lawyers. We have to teach them about the true history of this country, and only then will we begin to see real change, systemic change in all the bureaucracies, in the court systems, in our universities. We're beginning to see glimpses of that. You know, it's graduation time right now, and there's so many Indigenous women, there's so many Indigenous people graduating from university and from high school. And we are going to be making those changes to Canada, but we need everyone's help to do it with us, and that's why education reform is so important.
Final quick thought. I'm way over time, but I just want to get a sense from you. Are you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic because we have no There's no other way to look at our future. I'm optimistic in our youth. I'm optimistic in all of Canada's youth, and I know that we are going to get through this.
Tanya, we so appreciate your voice on this today. Good luck with your writing of your book. Tanya Talaga, thank you.
Miigwech.